All right. Good afternoon and welcome to our scoping plan feedback session. The topics today or this afternoon are land use, agriculture and forestry, just transition, and adaptation and resilience. As members are aware, the purpose of this feedback session is to gather initial feedback from them regarding topics that they believe need to be further discussed at public council meetings. And as a reminder, these feedback sessions are not deliberative. The feedback that is gathered here will be summarized at a subsequent public meeting. And we are also recording these sessions and they'll be posted to the Climate Act website. We do have, as a refresher, some slides that are taken from previous council meetings, just as a little bit of a reminder of what the staff recommendations were for each of the chapters. We're happy to have staff do a quick run through of each of those. What we will do is, if you'd like that, the staff can go give a quick overview of the topics that have been discussed for changes with the council, and then we'd open it up to council feedback. And then once we receive all the council member feedback on that particular topic, we'd proceed to the next topic. And so with that, we'll start off with land use. And Mario, since you appear to be the only council member on at this moment, I'll just ask, would you like us to give a little bit of an overview, or do you want to just jump right in? And it looks like you're on mute.
Yeah, I was going to ask if I was the only one. So no, I'm fine. I don't need the overview,
Okay.
Sarah. We've gone through it, and we'll have things to submit, the next day or so.
Okay, great. And welcome, Chair Christian.
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right. So if you don't need the overview, then I guess we can just open it right up for any feedback that you have on the land use chapter.
Like I said, we'll have some things to submit written, so I'm fine with where we
Okay.
are.
Rory, anything from you?
I do have a couple comments. I shared the bulk of them, I think, late last night, but there are a few I'd love to just talk through to amplify. Looking at just the overview section, I suggested a few recommended tweaks to the language there. But I do have some questions about the downtown revitalization initiative thus far, and its impact on GHG emissions. The language in the overview suggests that that's something that's being tracked and recorded, and curious to know if that information is available for the communities that are already engaged, and what kind of similar emissions reductions we can expect from future communities that participate in that. Not necessarily looking for an answer on this call, but just wanted to flag that as something that I think would be helpful in amplifying in the discussion.
Okay. I should point out, though, that this is Sarah Grohl from DOS, that we are not we're not actively tracking, at least in a quantitative way, those emissions as it relates to the downtown revitalization initiative. Specifically, I think it's more of a general understanding that the dense development and getting people out of cars does reduce overall emissions.
Okay. On page 7 in the afforestation and reforestation section, while discussing the number of trees currently produced in New York State and the anticipated annual need, there appears to be a fairly significant increase in the number of trees that we would need to execute this plan, almost a tenfold annual increase to some degree. And I didn't understand through the narrative how that would actually materialize, and I'm wondering if there's additional detail that can be added into that section. I see a tremendous workforce development component for that, which I think you've done a great job of articulating in this section, and I think the agriculture and market section to follow But I think a little additional detail on how that would be achieved would be helpful to beef this chapter up a bit.
Yes, this is Molly Hassett from DEC, Lands and Forests. Yeah, I'll look into trying to figure out how to beef that up a bit, pulling from the strategies.
There also was, Maureen, I'll note, there was a bit of work done that complemented the job study, Rory, that looks at the point that you're referring to there, that, you know, different job creation opportunities in forestry sector and the agriculture sector for climate mitigation strategies or sequestration strategies.
Yeah, those are the most significant of my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm not seeing any other council members on, so with that, I think we can move to the next topic, which is agriculture and forestry.
Sarah, I would be happy to, you know, begin the discussion going over the slide if Mario and Chair Christian would like. Otherwise, you know, we're all ears here.
I'm fine. I'm fine bypassing it. I'm good.
Mario, is it just you and I on this?
It's
From
just
the,
just the two of us, Rory. So I'm.
we could have met for coffee somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, I would have enjoyed that. I would have enjoyed that.
So this section dovetails really well with the land use section, so I'm glad it follows. One thing which I commented on for this, which applies to the land use as well, there seems to be an emphasis on maintaining rather than enhancing, and that troubled me a bit because there's definitely a desire to enhance our sequestration ability, a desire to enhance our landscape and land use policies, but the narratives seem to focus on maintaining, not enhance. So that's just a general comment that I think would ultimately apply both to this section and the preceding section, the land use section in particular. I do have, so 1 second, I need to turn to a particular page. So throughout the document, there's mention of the first instance of this is on page 7 and the second is on page 14. Mention of equivalent, when talking about carbon emitted, mention of equivalent to the CO2 that would be produced to power all the houses in New York for the next 100 years. And the footnote provided references a paper. I think it would be helpful to understand how that metric was derived. Was that a marginal emissions use? Was that a peak emissions metric? This is just one of those things that 6 years from now, someone's going to look back at this paper and question that a little bit and wonder where that metric came from. And it'll be helpful to talk through how that was arrived at in those 2 instances it's used in this chapter. And those are the only times I've seen it used in that way in the chapters I've reviewed. So I don't know if it's a one-off, but just flagging that as a concern. And yeah, those are my comments.
All right, thank you for those. So if nothing else on ag and forestry, we can move to just transition.
Okay. I don't need the update. I just have one sort of comment on that.
Okay.
When you're ready.
Go for it.
Just on page 7, I think it speaks to the technology mix. I just think it should be just broadened generally and making sure that alternative fuels is added to that. I think it's alternative fuels, biofuels, renewable natural gas. I'm not sure what I can't find the line that I was looking at. I think it's on. I'm sure it's on page 7.
Okay.
but just making sure the technology mix is broadened, Sarah.
Okay.
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 And I believe there's also a piece of that on page 10 as well, where it speaks to technology mix.
Ah, yeah.
Anything else on just transition?
That's,
Sorry. All right.
no, I'm sorry, Rory, go ahead.
No problem. All right. I noticed in this section there's a bit of use of passive voice. Probably, may, might pops up quite a bit. Didn't necessarily think that was needed. I think a stronger voice will be helpful where that stuff comes up. So just general flag. This chapter has a conflict on page 4 and page 6 in the workforce impacts and opportunities section. In page 4, natural gas is used. In page 6, and what was an additional section, fossil gas was used. Whichever one is used is fine. I just think we should be consistent. However, I do have a preference for the use of natural gas. To flag why, natural gas is already used in the existing regulatory language in established law. So whether you look at the environmental conservation law, the public service law, or even the general business law, you find multitudes of references to natural gas. You find some references to manufactured and town gas, which are unique uses. But fossil gas is a term that does not apply and is not in use. So flagging that in this section, as this is the first instance of the chapters reviewed in which this conflict has arisen, but I'm confident it'll come up in other chapters as we move forward. My recommendation again is that we just stick with one, and my preference is that it be natural gas. And then finally, my final comments. Sorry, 2 final comments. The mention of the various strategies, I think it's important that in talking about the strategies, we include the need for SMART metrics or SMART targets. So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound targets. I think for this section, those will be critically important to make sure that whatever we do aligns with the just transition principles set forth in the law. And it'll be helpful in keeping us on target. And then finally, on page 11, there's a list of organizations, and in that section, I was surprised to see the absence of the Department of Civil Service. I think, in addition to looking at workforce needs outside, I think we'll also need to look at workforce and training needs within the state as well. As I'm sure everyone on this call is quite familiar with, there are significant demands to meet the goals set forth, and we'll need staffing with appropriate expertise and the right positions to achieve those goals. And so I think Department of Civil Service will most definitely need to be included in conversations about workforce development going forward, and I think that should be added.
And Sarah, I actually did have 2 other quick things.
Sure.
Unless Rory, are you done, Rory?
I am done. Thank you.
Okay. Just on page, it's minor, page 3, first line, the state, it says must work to. I think it's a little weak if we could just make it must ensure that job losses are minimized, and just a little weak there with that when you work to, it's very subjective. And the other piece was down under ensuring application of labor standards to all, it says to all appropriate, I would leave it to all technology sectors. And middle of the paragraph where we talk about where appropriate, feasible, and permitted by law, I think that it should just be the default, without the caveats. It should just go read where project labor and community workforce agreements, as well as so on and so forth. I think it's just a little bit more direct without the caveats, and just that should be the default position where they exist,
Okay.
rather than just the appropriate, feasible, permitted by law. I think that's pretty much understood. That's it.
Okay.
Sarah, could I jump in with one clarifier for Rory?
Yes.
And thanks, Chair Christian, for the great feedback. When you mentioned the SMART metrics and SMART targets, I just didn't get a page number or a section that you were specifically thinking about those.
Terribly sorry. 1 second. That page 10, section 7.2, the workforce impacts.
Okay.
There's a discussion on the various strategies needed, and I felt it would be helpful to include a discussion on the need for metrics as well to accompany those strategies.
Perfect. Thank you.
So if there's nothing more on just transition, then we can move to adaptation and resilience.
Sarah, I apologize. On page 8, it speaks to training curriculum and programs. I had my pages mixed up. It should speak directly to union apprenticeship training programs. There's a piece there where it just speaks to training programs. It should be union, and that's it. My suggestion.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yep. Any feedback on adaptation and resilience?
No.
Yeah, I have a bit of feedback on this. So, all right, so this chapter is looking at strategies for making communities more resilient. But I found that much of the strategy and discussion focus on improving regulatory and planning actions for making resiliency efforts in the future more robust. And I wonder if there are any near-term actions that can be focused or brought to bear a little bit more. And to illustrate, I'll cite 2 examples, both of which are local to New York. In the immediate aftermath of Sandy, I can count dozens of news reports of how FEMA recovery efforts seem to focus on wealthier neighborhoods, homeowners, whereas renters and individuals with more transient homeownership situations either did not benefit or received no benefit. And I wonder if there's a way we can talk about the need to address that as improving resiliency in communities, particularly disadvantaged communities. So just something to, not quite sure how, but that was something I felt was missing a bit when talking about resilience in this section. The second example I'll cite, and this is an ongoing matter, I'm sure many of you are familiar with recent storms that cost the lives of many New Yorkers who lived in basements and the ensuing issues associated with that. I think that's something we should think about as well. Building codes, regulations, rules that limit the ability for certain members of our community to take advantage of the benefits that are available to others, that through just matter of circumstance, they may not be able to take advantage of. So I feel this chapter could benefit from some attention to that particular aspect of it, given the overarching focus on just transition and social equity. I think that's something we should consider incorporating in. And that's a general comment regarding the chapter as a whole. Going back to an earlier comment I made in the land use and the agriculture chapter, again, I see an emphasis on preservation, but not expansion. And again, I know we will need to do a lot of things bigger and better going forward as we execute on this plan. So I think it'll be helpful if we can frame this focus on adaptation as resilience, not just on preserving what we have, but also looking ahead and seeing what will we need in the future and how can we expand current capabilities to take that into account. Again, general comment. And yeah, I have a few other anodyne comments. But I think for the most part, those are the things I'd want to discuss today. So thank you.
All right. And Mario, you said you didn't have anything on adaptation and resilience?
I'm fine.
Okay. Any additional feedback on any of the topics? Land use, ag and forestry, just transition, or adaptation and resilience?
Nothing for now, Sarah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'm beginning to appreciate is the level of work you guys have done into putting this all together. As I'm reading through the chapters, I'm seeing the links and the cross references and just how things are tying nicely.
Oh, you went on mute.
Thank you. It seems to be consistent throughout. You know, a message in ag and markets definitely repeats in land use, and you see the root of that then in the just transition. So I definitely want to just, you know, give my thanks to the drafters for putting that kind of attention and making those connections so clear.
Thank you. We'll make sure they all get the message. All right. Well, if there's no other comments, I think we can wrap the session early.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Appreciate
you.
your
Thank you.
participation.
All right,
Thank you.
take care.
Take care.